17 days after the funeral, my kid called it practical. I called it my name on the title. The porch light clicked on the way it always had, steady, unbothered by grief. I stood in the doorway and watched Mark step from the cold, a printed checklist balanced on a clipboard, his breath fogging like he was still deciding which words were safe. I moved aside and let him in. The house smelled like lemon oil and old paper. He said hello without hugging me. We sat at the kitchen table we had refinished the year the twins left for college. He laid the paper down like a contract, and I set a mug of tea beside it. The list had boxes to tick and straight lines for signatures. He tapped the first line with a capped pen and said, "We need to be practical." I nodded because nodding buys time. My hand stayed folded on the placemat that still shows a faint coffee ring from a Sunday morning in 2008. I have learned that a kind rule is a handrail when the stairs are dark. He pointed at the words he had typed in a clean font. Sell the sedan. Move the savings under a joint account for safety. Change the locks so we can manage things more easily. He said those phrases the way people say forecast and budget, as if weather and life were cousins. I asked him to slow down. He smiled the smile you use when you think you are helping someone who cannot help herself. I sipped my tea and read the list twice. Then I asked him to pass me the pen so I could write dates in the margins. The porch creaked as the wind shifted. The porch always creaks when the maple out front forgets its manners. I opened the drawer where I keep small pencils and notepads. The drawer carries the soft smell of cedar blocks and spare keys. I wrote 3 words where he had written 1. Bank appointment. Together. DMV. Together. Locks. Discuss. He frowned at the word discuss. I tapped the calendar on the wall and said we would set times everyone could keep. My voice stayed even. Even works better than loud when you want the rails to hold. He pushed his chair back a few inches, like distance would make the conversation easier. "Mom, we're trying to keep you safe," he said. The we meant him and Laura. The safe meant I should surrender small things that add up to a life. I told him what I believed. Safety is a net, not a leash. He said nothing for a moment. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Time was polite enough to keep walking. I stood and reached for my coat. The night had a thin frost to it, not the kind that bites, the kind that reminds you to see your breath. "Come with me," I said. He followed me to the garage where the old sedan waited under a gray cover like an animal that remembers. I opened the driver's door and reached into the glove box. There is a quiet click when you slide your hand under paper. You have organized yourself. I took out a manila folder, and the letter paper my husband preferred for official things. On the top was a photocopy of the vehicle title with my name, printed the same way it appears on the mailbox. "Your father kept this for peace of mind," I said. "I keep it for the same reason." Mark crossed his arms but leaned in. The copy had a tidy date and no liens. Behind it was a printout of the HOA bylaws with a paragraph highlighted that says no one may change locks without the documented consent of the titled owner. Not a threat, just a rule. A few pages down lay the bank's brochure that explains joint accounts with clearer words than most people use when they promise to help. My son skimmed, then met my eyes like he wished he could unsee the paragraph that did not support his plan. We went back inside. The kitchen held its temperature and its calm. Laura arrived 10 minutes later with a casserole that smelled like duty and cream of mushroom soup. She placed it on the stove and kissed my cheek as if to bless the conversation they had already decided to finish tonight. "We printed everything to make it easy," she said. She removed color-coded tabs from her purse and stuck them on the checklist. Blue for car, green for bank, yellow for locks. I admired the effort. I have never despised effort. I just prefer it pointed in the right direction. I set the manila folder in the center of the table and opened the blue tin box Mary kept under the hall table. Mary was not a woman who liked arguments. She liked labels that could be read from arm's length and sheets of paper kept flat. In the box were copies of the will we updated 2 years before she died, the small note that lists where the keys are stored, and a USB drive that holds scanned receipts and photographs. I placed the USB near Mark's clipboard. Order sat next to order, each waiting to see whose patience would last longer. Before we sell anything, I said, we will read what we have already written. Laura smiled like I had made a joke at my own expense. She assured me they would handle the paperwork because stress is heavy at my age. I thanked her and told her my stress lifts when I can see the edges of a task. Then I turned the title copy so the light hit it square. My finger rested on the last line. My name on the title is not a metaphor. It is ink. He tried another angle. We could put the money where I can move it fast if there's an emergency. I wrote a sentence beneath his suggestion. All future changes require my in-person consent. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Laura cleared her throat and asked whether we might at least change the locks now, because she had read a thread about widows and break-ins. The thread might be true for someone else. Threads do not know my neighborhood. I told them about Mr. Harris, who manages the HOA like a fair schoolteacher. He will check the security lights this Friday, and he walks at dusk with his coffee when the teenagers let their music get ahead of their manners. I told them about Pastor Lee, who leaves the sanctuary door open every afternoon for anyone who needs a quiet bench. The library holds new jigsaw puzzles and old maps, and both are a kind of therapy. None of this solves a real emergency, but it builds a fence around panic. Panic behaves when it meets structure. I asked for the pen. I wrote dates that we would keep whether our feelings felt helpful or not. Tuesday, 10 a.m., bank, Mom, Mark, and Laura. Thursday, 2 p.m., DMV. Mom present, title in hand, questions listed before we go. Friday, 4 p.m., locksmith, on site with HOA manager to record changes in log keys. Laura wrote the same dates in her planner. The casserole cooled and stopped smelling like a plan and started smelling like dinner that would not be eaten together. He circled the word car with excessive ink. "You don't drive much," he said. My pride did not enjoy that sentence, but my pride has learned to share space with facts. I told him I would sell the car when I wanted to and to whom I chose, with a clean bill of sale and a copy kept in the blue tin. The hardware store owner had already offered to buy it fairly because his niece needed a starter vehicle. He would bring cashier's check, not cash, and he would bring patience. I like patience more than speed. Laura went quiet for a while, then read the highlighted HOA paragraph and the bank brochure. She taught elementary school before the twins were born, and I could tell she recognized the tone of the documents. They were not scolding us. They were keeping us safe the boring way. She folded her hands and said, "I didn't realize the locks needed your written consent." I nodded. "Most good things still ask permission," I said, "including a lock." We reached the part of the list labeled accounts. That word can make people forget their upbringing. I opened another folder and showed them the small ledger I keep with dates, amounts, and notes that say things like Mark's baseball glove and Laura's dental crown. The ledger is not a weapon. It is a memory that does not accuse. "This helps me see what we have already built," I said. "It also helps me not to be suspicious when I am tired." Mark looked at the line where his wedding was written in careful cursive. For a moment, the clipboard seemed too heavy for slap. When conversations begin to fray, I stand up. Standing is not anger. It is a way to let the room breathe. I refilled the kettle and set out 3 clean mugs. "We can argue," I said. Or we can measure twice and let the rules hold. He rubbed his jaw the way his father did when work had not gone as planned. I'm trying to be responsible, he said. I know, I answered. I am too. The doorbell rang at 8:20. Mr. Harris stood on the porch with his coffee in a travel cup and a folded sheet from the HOA office. Evening, Elaine, he said. I received a call that someone was testing your back door this afternoon. I walked over to check the lock and lights. Everything looks fine, but I wanted you to have this courtesy note. He glanced past me and saw my son at the table. He smiled like a neighbor who has walked other people through other situations. Just a reminder, he said to all of us. Any lock changes need owner consent on file. We like to keep the records tidy. He tipped his head and left before anyone could be embarrassed. Laura stared at the note and then at me. She whispered, "We were only trying to help." I touched her wrist and kept my voice soft. I know. Help works best inside the lines. Mark exhaled through his nose and sat down again. He scratched out the words, "Change locks now," and wrote consult HOA next to Friday's date. He did not apologize, and I did not require it. Sometimes dignity is not collecting debts you could collect. The kettle clicked off. The kitchen held in the steam and the small relief of a rule that arrived right on time. We ate the casserole in small portions and spoke about the twins' math tests. We listed ordinary things because ordinary things patch the places where pride has torn. After dinner, I took the USB from the table and plugged it into the old laptop that still starts with a whirring sound. On the screen appeared photographs of family picnics and the first house Mark bought, then sold, then regretted selling. I clicked through until I found the photo of him at 16, tightening a bolt on the porch swing with his father's ratchet. "Measure twice," the caption says. "Then try the swing together." He smiled without meaning to. The room relaxed a fraction. The refrigerator cycled again like a metronome we agree to follow when the song has no words. I closed the laptop and returned the USB to the tin. I placed the title copy and the HOA paragraph atop the clipboard where the checklist waited. "We'll bring these on Tuesday," I said. "We will read them again when we feel rushed." He nodded and did not disguise the relief that rules can sometimes provide. Before they left, Laura asked if she could come early on Thursday to ride with me to the DMV. "We can stop at the library afterward," she said. "They set out a new puzzle last week." I told her I would like that. She hugged me longer than she had intended. Mark carried the empty casserole dish to the sink and set it down gently as if noise might break something more fragile than glass. At the door he paused. "Mom," he said, "thank you for being calm." I told him calm is a choice I make, like locking the door at night. It does not make me less awake. It makes me steady. When the house was quiet again, I wrote a sentence in my notebook. Boundaries, not noise. I underlined it once and dated the page. Then I placed the notebook on the counter beside the mail basket and the car keys. The porch light clicked off on its timer, then on again when the motion sensor saw the maple shake. The light knows what it is for. I am learning the same lesson every day. There is still work to do on Tuesday. There is still kindness available on Thursday. There is still room for a rule that remembers our dignity. I washed the 2 mugs and left the third to dry for morning when my neighbor Ruth stops by after Bible study. She will ask if the birds have found the feeder again. I will answer that the cardinals return when the yard is quiet. She will nod because some truths do not need new words to feel new. I turned out the kitchen light and checked the deadbolt. The lock turned with that small, satisfying click. Consent given. Consent recorded. The house learned my quiet and returned it to me without argument. I slept well enough, which is different from sleeping through. In the early hours, I woke once and listened for the sound of the furnace. It came on like it should, steady and practical in the best sense of the word. I thought about Tuesday and the bank manager who prints papers that speak calmly when people cannot. I thought about Thursday and the DMV clerk who will staple a receipt exactly where it belongs. I thought about Friday, Mr. Harris, and a locksmith who will write our names on a line that says, "Who may make copies?" I fell back asleep before the furnace cycled off. Morning brought sun on the table and a small drift of mail under the door slot. A church bulletin, a hardware flyer, a letter from the county about property tax. I stacked them by size and felt the rhythm of a day I still own. I wrote a list that begins, "Call the bank to confirm Tuesday," and ends, "Make sandwiches for the DMV line." The list is not a leash. It is a net with a generous weave. When Mark called at 9 to ask if we could push Tuesday by an hour, I said yes, and I wrote the new time in careful numbers. We are all learning the pace at which dignity moves. It is slower than panic and faster than resentment. At noon, I drove the sedan to the market for bread and apples. The engine purred like a cat who has forgotten to be suspicious. Mr. Patel waved from the hardware store doorway, and I waved back. He will bring his niece next week to look at the car. We will stand by the hood and speak in sentences with clear edges. He will hand me a cashier's check with my name spelled correctly. I will sign a bill of sale and keep the copy in the tin. There will be no drama, only the relief that follows an honest exchange. That evening, Mark and Laura returned with a smaller clipboard and fewer colors. We reviewed the dates and the documents again. Then we rehearsed the words we would use if a bank clerk asked a muddled question. I would say, "I am the owner. My son assists me." He would say, "I am here to help, not to decide." We practiced once more because practice makes the hands less clumsy when the paper is important. Laura smiled for real this time. She said she liked the sentence about help. Before they left, I spoke the boundary in full. "Do not change my locks, move my money, or sell my things without me," I said. "I will not do those things without you either. We will use the rails that already exist." The words felt like bricks mortared in place by patience. He promised. She promised. I believed them because the rule we chose is a rule you can inspect in daylight. I watched their car turn at the corner. Then I turned out the porch light and let the quiet finish the thought for me. Tuesday arrived with a sky the color of clean paper. Mark parked by the curb and came to the door with 2 folders, not 3. Laura carried a thermos and a small bag of pretzels because lines are easier with salt. We drove to the bank with the radio low. The parking lot had the usual Tuesday rhythm: contractors in paint-splattered vans, retirees with lists, a mother teaching a teenager to park between the lines. I felt steady. I liked seeing everyone practice their rules. Inside, the branch manager greeted us with a practiced kindness that lands like a warm coat. She offered a small room with glass walls and a printer that remembers its job. Mark introduced me the way we rehearsed. "I'm here to help my mother," he said. I nodded and placed my identification on the table before anyone asked. The manager opened our file and pointed to the sentence that governs access. It uses modest words and has no opinion about family. "Changes require the documented consent of all owners," she said. "We do this to protect people we respect." Her sentence landed like a handrail exactly where steps begin. We updated the beneficiary lines Mary and I had chosen years ago. We added Laura's phone for the emergency contact because emergencies respect organization more than bloodlines. The manager printed a summary and asked me to sign where the arrows pointed. I read each paragraph. I signed in a hand that has learned to keep even pressure. Mark watched my pen move and did not fidget. When we finished, the manager placed the papers in a labeled envelope and thanked us for being clear. Clarity is a kind of courtesy. It saves everyone from guessing. We stopped at the library. Ruth waved from the circulation desk and held up a puzzle box with a lighthouse on the cover. Laura and I opened the box while Mark checked the job board to see if the hardware store needed extra holiday help. We worked the edges first. We sorted blues from grays and made a small island of red roof pieces. The room smelled faintly of books and lemon cleaner. Everything in that space agrees to be steady. We did not rush. We did not whisper. We followed the picture on the box and watched a shoreline appear, one honest piece at a time. Thursday we went to the DMV. The line curved around a rope barrier with the patience of people who know that lines are part of life. I held the title and the bill of sale template I had printed from the state website. A clerk called our number and smiled like she had almost learned to enjoy her work. She checked my identification and asked a simple question. "Are you transferring title today?" I answered with the sentence we practiced. "Not today. I'm confirming the process so the sale is clean when I'm ready." She appreciated that word clean. She printed the checklist that explains how to protect both parties, then circled the fee in a red pen so there would be no surprises later. We thanked her and stepped away without leaving confusion behind us. Friday afternoon, Mr. Harris arrived with a clipboard that belonged to the HOA before either of us did. The locksmith measured the front door and wrote numbers on a carbon copy pad. He asked who should be authorized to make duplicates. I spoke the names slowly. Myself? Mark? A small spare for the realtor one day, stored at the office in a sealed envelope with my signature across the flap. He wrote the list and read it back before we signed. He placed the original in his folder and handed me the yellow copy for the 10. There was no triumph in the room, only relief that we had obeyed the structure we all claimed to value. That evening, an envelope from the county lay under the door slot. Property tax. Due in a month. I set it beneath my notebook where the sentence from earlier sat in blue ink. Boundaries, not noise. I added a second sentence. Bills are not insults. Paying them honors the agreements that keep a roof honest. I wrote the due date on the calendar and placed the envelope in the tray marked now so that later does not have to panic. The next week, Mr. Patel brought his niece to see the car. She is a nurse who works nights and wants a sedan that starts when asked and does not argue with winter. We stood in the driveway while the engine idled with a patient tone. She listened to the motor and to me. I told her which noises are normal and which should persuade her to turn around. We took a short drive along Maple Ridge Road and back again. She nodded at the dashboard that glows a soft green. She said it felt like something she could trust. We completed the bill of sale together on the hood, with a clipboard and 2 pens in case one failed. She handed me a cashier's check. I checked the name twice and thanked her for writing so clearly. Mr. Patel shook my hand the way men do when they intend to remain neighbors. We all smiled without hurry. I placed the copy of the sale in the tin and the keys in her palm. She placed gratitude in her voice and the seatbelt across her shoulder. Mark watched all of this from the porch steps. He did not interrupt. When they drove away, he said, "That was quieter than I expected." I told him quiet is not the same as weak. Quiet is attention with its shoes tied. He sat beside me and stared at the maple while the leaves practiced letting go. "I see that now," he said. "I'm still learning." We sat a while longer and let the house be a house. I kept small promises to myself. I walked to church with Ruth on Sunday and stayed afterward to stack hymnals. Pastor Lee asked how I was, and I answered with sentences shorter than my worry and longer than my fear. He nodded and used the word season the way gardeners do. Season implies an end. That helped. At the library, the lighthouse puzzle reached its last 100 pieces. At home, the porch swing creaked in the same place it has creaked since Mark tightened the bolt at 16. I chose not to fix that sound. It tells the story just as well as grease ever could. On Wednesday, the bank manager called to confirm a detail. "We adjusted the alert settings," she said. "You will receive a message for any withdrawal over $200. Would you like your son copied?" I paused, because choices deserve pauses. "No copy," I said. "He will hear from me if I need him." She understood, which is to say, she wrote the setting we chose and did not argue. Good systems are like that. They hold without explaining themselves twice. A week later, the courtesy notice from the HOA turned into a small follow-up card that simply said, "Thank you for your cooperation." I put the card on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a cardinal. Laura laughed when she read it, because only my refrigerator displays gratitude from a committee. She asked if she could bring the twins to rake leaves on Saturday. I said yes and set out 3 rakes and a bag of cider donuts, because work is easier when sweetness waits at the end. Saturday was leaf gray with a slice of sun. The twins made piles and fell into them while pretending not to be 12. Mark tied the leaf bags and loaded them into the truck. Laura swept the porch with a rhythm borrowers use when they mean to earn their keep. After we finished, we sat on the steps and ate donuts. Sugar dusted our coats. We spoke about school projects, a holiday program at church, and the neighbor's new dog who refuses to respect fences. No one mentioned the word practical. The maple lost another handful of leaves and looked no worse for it. After lunch, I brought out a small box. "I have something to show you," I said. Inside lay a simple trust document that Mary and I made when the doctor used a cautious tone about her heart. It is not complicated. It does not hide treasure. It names me as trustee now and names Mark as successor when I step aside. It keeps the roof from becoming a rumor if a bad day comes. I placed the document on the step between us and let the ink do the speaking. He read slowly. Laura read after him. Their faces settled into something like relief. "I didn't know you had this," he said. "That's because you didn't need to," I answered. "Today you do." He looked at the signature lines and the notarized stamp, and the way Mary's name sits next to mine like it always will. He swallowed and touched the paper the way people touch a memorial plaque without meaning to. "Thank you," he said. He did not mean for the trust. He meant for the boundary that kept us from breaking while we learned. We planned a family day at the library the following week. Not a meeting, not a check-in. A day with a thermos and sandwiches at a table near the big windows. We brought our notebooks and wrote numbers that answered simple questions. What does the house cost each month? What will the roof need next spring? What can the twins earn for helping Mrs. Dunn shovel her sidewalk? Laura added a column for gifts and a column for savings because generosity is easier when it gets a line of its own. We were not building a fortress. We were building a map that anyone at the table could read. At the end of the day, I wrote a sentence at the top of the page. Help inside the lines. Laura wrote it too because teachers know a good rule when they see one. Mark drew a small box at the bottom of the page and labeled it surprises. He laughed at himself and left it blank because we are not prophets. We agreed to meet once a month in the same chair by the same window until it no longer felt necessary. We shook on it without ceremony. Some contracts belong to families and do not need a witness. Time smoothed the rough places. The bank sent no alarming alerts. The locksmith's list kept the keys from multiplying like rabbits. The HOA's files stayed tidy. Mr. Patel's niece drove past sometimes after a night shift and honked twice, then waved. The library finished the lighthouse and started a barn in winter. Church added a casserole list for members who could use a warm pan and a knock at the door. I signed up for the Tuesday slot because Tuesdays like structure. At Christmas, Mark stood on the porch I helped pay for and said, You are expected." He did not mean it as a joke, but we smiled anyway. The twins had painted a small sign that says Family Day, first Saturdays. They traced the letters in blue and added 2 cardinals that look like red commas. We hung the sign in the kitchen near the calendar. I wrote the next date in ink that does not smudge. Laura hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for trusting us with a better plan." I told her trust grows faster than resentment when you water it. That night, after the house returned to quiet, I made tea and stood by the window. The porch light clicked on because the maple cannot resist moving, even in the cold. I thought about Mary and the way she liked things labeled before a trip. I thought about the sentence we kept, boundaries, not noise, and the ways it had held. I opened the notebook and added 1 more line. Steady is a kind of love. The words did not feel poetic. They felt useful. I turned the deadbolt and felt its small, honest click. Consent given. Consent recorded. I left the hallway lamp on for the morning because mornings appreciate a warm welcome. Then I went to bed and slept like a person who owns her days. The furnace hummed like a sensible friend in the next room. Somewhere down the street a dog barked twice and then remembered the rules. The house learned my quiet and gave it back.